Hello, my name is Ariel Jillian, and welcome to the Queen's Corner, where we really dive deep into some uncomfortable truths that I believe we need to talk about. Okay, and today our topic is how the Black community lost their voice and their true identity. Okay, and why do I think that this happened? Because I have seen through our generations how our older people, our parents, our grandparents in the Black community sometimes are very silent about the past. And I don't think I'm the only one who noticed this, okay? So we're gonna do a little American history lesson. Okay, so I believe that we're American Indians and that we're not African American. So I wanna get that out the way quickly. Okay, so if you believe that you are from this land, you have to realize that history does not start with slavery, okay? And slavery was not the way that they said it was, all right? There was actually a struggle. When the first English settlers came to America, there was too many Indians for them to either kill, eradicate, or assimilate. There was just too many, okay? Now, this government was founded, what, in 1776, 1779? We know that story. But our government struggled with power for about 100 or so years, okay? So between like the 1770s and the 1870s, okay, there was a lot of wars fought, okay? Our ancestors fought for this land, okay? I don't want you to think that they just, Ted said, you guys can move in, it's all yours. 100 years, there was a lot of wars, okay? They fought for this, okay? But what the first English settlers did was they planned, okay? They thought it through, and when they got a little bit of power, what they would do so that they could keep the power, okay? And so what they did was, after 100 years of war or so, not only, okay, so slavery, let's just debunk that right now, okay? Slavery was not how these movies portray it, not what you think. We did not come over here in chains, okay? It's called indentured servitude, okay? So back then, it was mostly American Indians that owned land, right? And all of the immigrants coming from different countries in England, different parts of the world came over here. A lot of them were poor, or a lot of them were seeking asylum from their government, their own governments, okay? And a lot of them came over here and just wanted to work, wanted to find somewhere to fit in, okay? And at that time, that's when the American Indians, they would form treaties, or they would take on these English immigrants, and they would tell them, you could work for us, okay? And that was indentured servitude, okay? So not only we weren't slaves, but whites were slaves as well, but it was called indentured servitude. It was not this beating and all of this stuff. It was, you would work for someone for a certain amount of years and they would pay you, and sometimes they would pay you very little, okay? And that's where slavery comes in. When you're working for little to no money, that's what slavery is, okay? They dramatized it completely. Everything in America is dramatized. And if you don't know that by now, I don't know where you're living, okay? They dramatized that part. But, okay, so let's go back to when, the late 1800s, 1860, 1870, that's when the American government started to really flourish. All right. And how they were able to flourish in our communities was by teaching the children. All right. Now, at first, blacks were in their own schools, or Negroes at the time. American Indians were in their own schools and stuff. But at this point, they weren't getting the support that the government was starting to give to the white schools that were starting to come up in this era. Okay. So they started to realize that these immigrants had more rights coming over here and were granted these lands taken from American Indians and granted these monies, and these schools were built, and they were throwing more money into the education of their children than ours. Okay. Now, when you get to the 1940s, 1950s, when civil rights started coming on, and then the news and the media started coming on, and they really pushed that Black Americans wanted no more segregation, right? And they wanted to be integrated into these schools. And then that's when you see that the children were really starting to be indoctrinated, okay? When you start to educate a child, and this is really sad to me because, I'm in education as well. I've been a teacher, I've been a high school teacher for many years in my past, and also very recently I was in the school system, and that's a whole nother video. But, teaching the youth is a very critical time in their life, and the fact that they were able to get to the youth so young, and this is predominantly in the 1960s. So think about it, it's 1940s, 50s to today. It's about 100 years, okay? A little over 100 years of them being able to educate us from our youth, okay? So our parents don't kind of remember a thing. Our grandparents kind of don't remember a thing because they've all been in this system, okay? So that's how we kind of lost our voice. We let them tell us who we were for the past 100 or so years, for sure. We have. And I believe our adults have been so quiet because of that early indoctrination that America had, okay? When you think about when TV first started coming out, okay, there was 5 channels, okay? And everybody got the same information. So if you think about it like that, you think about how little information our people were getting. And then you think about who was giving us that little information that we had, that wouldn't affect us down the line, okay? So some of our grandparents, granted, a lot of them still have stories, and we have to ask what those stories are. Because if we don't ask them what those stories are, they probably won't tell us. Because they've been silent for a long time. They've been silent for a long time. And America, there's always been this prospect of hope and that you can really pick yourself up by your bootstraps. And I really think our parents' generation believed that they could. I really think our grandparents believed that everything was going to be better for their children. So that's why they assimilated into American society, So through this education of the child, okay, for the past hundreds of years, they've been able to really put our community, our people, in a slumber. And you can tell. But it's time to wake up. It's time for us to wake up. History did not start 100 years ago. It did not start 200 years ago when America was founded, okay? It started way before that. We have to start doing some more research on our own to really figure out what happened, okay? Especially in the areas of the 1600s to the 1800s, That's where the most research needs to be done, because that's when the most wars happen. That's when the most treaties happen, and the most treaties were broken at that time. Okay? So that's where most of our energy needs to go, because we weren't taught none of that in school, and we won't be taught none of that in an American education right now. So that's what we need to be focusing on, to really put the pieces back together, because we did not come from Africa. That is a myth, okay? In the 1600s, all they had was sailboats. So you're saying that we traveled, that they captured us, right? 10 million of us, okay? If you just do the little math, it don't make sense, okay? So 10 million people, how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of captains of ships would you need to even do that? There would be logs of these captains. They logged everything, right? There would be logs of these hundreds of thousands of captains. And I'm not even talking about the so-called slaves that they brought over. There would just be logs of who brought them over here, if so-called 10 million came. Okay, so we have to start doing these key research and start talking to each other, start cross-referencing with each other, so we can really put back history, okay? So we can start putting back history, okay? And one more thing I want to say about how we lost our true identity was because of the Native American Party, okay? And I say Native American Party because it is a party just like the Democrats and the Republicans. There is a Native American Party, okay? And they were founded in the 1800s, okay? So their history in America is only what? About 223 years old, okay? Native Americans were the first English settlers that came over and had contact with the American Indians, okay? They studied us. They always study us, okay? We've been studied for a long time. They studied us, studied the culture, studied the dress, studied the traditions, and they took all of that rich culture, wrote that it was them, okay? And then made it illegal for us to claim that culture, okay? Made it illegal, okay? In the state of Virginia, you could go to jail for up to a year if you claimed that you were Native American or that you were of Indian blood, okay? And that's why when you ask parents or grandparents, they'll be like, oh, you have to prove that you're Indian, or how much Indian do you have in you, you know, because it was so taboo in those times when they were reconstructing America to fit their own narratives for the original inhabitants to even claim that, okay? So when you look at the Native American Party, which all I do is have sympathy for them, because they're the people that are the descendants of those people that claimed a false identity, are waking up to who they really are, and they're depressed, okay, and they're alcoholics and drug addicts because they understand that their forefathers and ancestors made this whole thing up. That's why they're called the know-nothings, because whenever they were asked about where they came from or who they were, they knew nothing. Okay, so I have nothing but sympathy for anyone who claims that they're Native American, because that just means that their ancestors had a lot going on. Okay, and God's judgment is swift. Okay, so I have nothing against the Native American Party. You can say you're Native American as long as much as often as you want, but are you a true American? Can your ancestors be traced back hundreds of years? Probably not, but that's okay. You know, we're all waking up to the truth, okay? They whitewashed the Indian look, okay? There is tons and tons of proof that they came over here and whitewashed it, okay? Eugenics, okay? There was a plan to say that the white race was a superior race. So they whitewashed history. They whitewashed the true Americans, okay? And some of us are light to begin with. We've been light forever. Okay, it was light and dark over here. Okay, but they wanted to just annihilate anyone who was dark. So that's how I believe the Black community lost their voice and their identity, because their identity was stolen. Do I feel like we need to steal it back? No. Do I feel like we should research all the stuff that they took? Yes. But we have had a rich identity for the past 200 years, even if we didn't know who we were. Every decade is just brimming with culture and invention and just spunk and spark. No matter what they threw at us, they couldn't kill the true Indian inside. And that's what they tried to do. Okay, they said, save the man and kill the Indian. Okay, that's why our boys, our men are just so angry on the inside, because they know there's a piece that's just not being told to them. And this is what it is. Okay, and we can get our identities back. We were cool in the 50s, cool in the 60s, 70s. We were funky in the 80s. We were on top of it. In the 90s, we were cool. In the 2000s, to the 10s, we're always cool, whatever we look like, okay? So even if they wanted to experiment on us, their experiment just led into this amazing experience of who we were in each decade. And we have such a cool collection of just amazing inventions and art and culture through all of the struggle. So, God will always make the crooked path straight, and I don't believe this is the end of our culture at all. I think this is just the beginning of a new start of who we really are, and just loving ourselves in each decade, and really learning to love ourselves in the future, and really start to educate our kids on what is really right. So I hope you got something out of this, okay? Thank you for watching, and have a good rest of your day.